Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our weekly Hebrew word study. And we are in 1 Samuel chapter 21, picking up at verse 11. Just a quick recap is that David is fleeing from Saul, has fled again from the presence of where Samuel was, and now goes to the place where the tabernacle was and has this encounter with the priest that's there, eats the hallowed bread, picks up the sword from Goliath's, and now he runs into this Doeg guy and feels he's going to be threatened, so he takes off again. So here he is running. You know, this is very strange to try to understand what's going on here. So we get to verse 11 where we pick up and just give you a little bit of a sense for how the Hebrew sounds. Vayakam David vayivrach bayom ahu mifnei Shaul vayavo el Achish melech Gath. So David rose, fled from the high priest there, and goes to Gath. Now, what's strange about this? Remember that name Gath? This is where Goliath is from. Where's David running to? He's going to the Philistine king, his enemies, the one that he, slew many of the Philistines. Here he's running to them for protection. This just has questions rising every which way for me. Questions like, why did he run there? Why did he flee from where God's presence was? First he was with Samuel, then he was where the tabernacle was, and now he's completely on the opposite end, fleeing out of Israel into a neighboring hostile land of his enemies, the Philistines. And he slew Goliath from Gath. You would think he would be a wanted man here, and there would be no place safe for him. And so why is he going there? Another question that obviously is the big one in the room here is, why isn't David trusting in God to protect him? What's going on here? So we have a lot more questions than we have answers, but something that does kind of rise up through this lesson here is that how patient God is with us as we make mistakes, as this is a time of learning for David. This is all new to him. He's still very young yet. We think he's still a young man, still in his teens, maybe early 20s. We really don't know. They call him a youth, but that's a very challenging term to nail down because we don't know exactly how old he was. So he's a young man making mistakes, running on his own cognizance and his own ideals, and he doesn't have the foundation and the grounding of maturity yet. He knows he's chosen by God, but yet still trying to feel through that. And so in the midst of this, I'm choosing to look at this as God revealing that he can still be with someone, and then we can apply it to ourselves depending upon where we are and what we're doing that maybe we shouldn't be, as we're trying to feel out what God's plan is for us, and we run to places we probably shouldn't be. And here we see God's mercy in action. And so that's my take on it. I'm not sure if you'll see that too, but we'll see where this goes. And so the king saw him of Achish, and says, "What is David doing here?" And he calls him David Melech. He calls him the king of the land of Israel. Now, again, this was written afterwards, and we know David becomes king, um, but here. It's being recorded that he recognizes who David was. He sees him as an enemy. And of course, here he rehearses what the people spoke of after Goliath was slain, that Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And of course, here why David wouldn't have thought this out ahead of time, but we get to verse 13, and the Hebrew goes, Vayesem David et hadavarim ha'ele um, bilavo. He took these words to heart. You will notice the word that's translated as words is the word davar. And so these are words from the heart. And I like the connection here that it is kind of a double emphasis on it. It's davarim ha'ele bilvavo, um, words to the heart. And so it's pretty explicit here. And it says he was afraid. Vayira me'od, uh, afraid very much. And Mipane of from the face of Achish Melech Gath, king of Ashesh of Gath. And so it says he resorted into um, crisis mode, basically here. And so here we get to kind of the crux of this whole portion here of what David did was when he was in the midst of this life or death situation. And it says he changed his behavior before him, feigned madness, scratched on the doors of the gate, let his saliva fall from his beard, and, he pretended he was a madman. And the wording in here is really, really fun. Um, you have to, with Hebrew, you have to realize that there are only 7,500 words basically in biblical Hebrew compared to well over a million, close to 2 million in English. And so many words have dual meanings, and that's what translation, why it becomes very challenging in the Hebrew. So you have to look at the context of what's happening. And we'll find later on, that Aishas says in verse 15, he says, this guy's insane. Why have you brought madmen to me? Don't I have enough madmen in my kingdom? And you're going to bring him into my house as a guest? Get out of here. What are you doing? Obviously, what David's charade here was very, very convincing. We don't know how long it went on, but it was long enough that Achish, even though knowing who David was and what he had done, was thoroughly convinced that David was insane. And he obviously let his countenance, his hygiene go. He was just acting as a madman and had him convinced. But some of these words are really interesting here, like the word for his feigned madness. Let's just open this up, H 1984, and it is the word halal. And if you think of the word halal, think of the word hallelujah. Doesn't this sound strange that this word for madness is tied into what we use as a word for praising? But the word halal, actually, the root word here is to let shine, that you're letting shine what's inside of you and expressing outwardly what is going on inwardly. And that's a really neat way to look at the word halal and the word hallelujah as we give what should be shining from within us, as in praise, back to God. And in fact, something shining can only be reflecting. And so, in that way, we love this word. But here, what's happening is it's an outward reflection of what Aishas sees inside of David, and it's translated as portraying or feigning madness. He's letting this shine out from him, which is kind of interesting. And so we get to this word saliva. Of course, you have to look this up and just see what is going on here. And we find, of course, this is not a word that's used very much at all, only twice in the Hebrew Bible. And it's rear, and it means slimy juice or spittle. And the two times it's used in the Bible are this one time here for David, and another time to describe the white of an egg. Again, you get the picture, you get the understanding, but a very seldom used biblical Hebrew word here. But it gives you the impression of what he's doing here. And the word, interesting that he scratched on the doors of the gate, and it has it in a PL form. He was really putting on a show. It must have been a challenge to keep this up. And you wonder, why did he do this? Why didn't he, why wasn't there something else he could have done? Um, You'll find that this happens again later on in the Bible. So it's just something very strange, and we don't have an answer for it. We come to the end of the chapter. But why did David have to resort to this type of deception? Um, you want to think that he would have just trusted in God and would have been delivered and had all kinds of confidence. You see that come later. This is obviously a time of development, a time of growth in David's life. And you know, we don't know why he did this. We don't know why others in the Bible, Abraham, why did he lie and pretend that Sarah was his sister and did it numerous times? It also, why did Isaac do the same thing? Just things we don't understand, but it shows the humanity. It shows what happens when people resort to what they feel is their own imaginations and to do what they feel is best. But yet we see, at least I feel I see the compassionate and the mercies of God to not cast someone off because they've made a mistake. And I'm very grateful for that because surely I wouldn't be here and most of us would not be here if it were not for God's tender mercies helping us through these times when we do foolish things and make mistakes and do things that are not trusting in God, that he sees us from the beginning to the end and he has great compassion and great mercy. So thank you for listening and enduring this story with me here today. And I pray it's a blessing and an encouragement to you. All right. Bye bye.